Hey everyone, this is Brian, and I'm here with my review of 193, which I got yesterday in the mail. And it's kind of funny. They say that the issue, officially comes out like around the 21st, or around the second to last week in the month. And the reason I say it's kind of funny is because they say it came out on the 21st, the newsstands, and I get mine on the 22nd. Well, anyway, here's my review. First of all, I thought it was a pretty good story. I think it's kind of hilarious right here where, Sonic, is asking Amy if she's ready, and, she's kind of being a little flirtatious with him by saying she'll be with him and she'll be ready for anything. And like I said, it's a good story because it kind of gives us, kind of answers some questions that we've always been wondering about. This part here I thought was pretty funny, how Sonic said, "Hey, I thought you said it was a solo mission." And Sally said, "Well, you'll need a backup on a hostile world that we know little about." And basically the fact that, she's playing on the fact, and basically Sally's just playing on the fact that Amy wanted to be spending more time with Sonic. And Sonic's like, "You're cruel." Basically, and what that means when he says you're cruel, he's just basically saying, that I don't mind spending time with Amy, but you know how she is with me and her feelings. Basically acknowledging, as we all said, that to him, Amy's just a friend, not anything else. Well, anyway, we go from there. We find out the Starpost are ready by Rotor and Tails. And then we end up on Mobius, as it says right here, Mobius. I don't know if you can see that. And then they end up running into, as soon as Amy and Sonic get there, they run into Omega, who we find out is aligned with Dr. Kabuto, or whatever his name is. But as Dr. Kabuto, whatever the good Robotnik, let's put it that way, comes up, he tells Buns, and we're going to find out, to stop. They're not enemies, and that they're actually friends. And here we have Sonic basically explaining the situation to the good Dr. Eggman. And then we go back to New Mobotropolis, and here we have Sally basically saying she hates this part, basically the waiting part, because it's killing her, wondering what's going on. Now, if that doesn't tell me that Sally still has some feelings for Sonic, and not just, not Amy, but for Sonic, then I don't know what. Sorry about the noise. And then we have Nicole basically coming up and telling Sally that Miles, as a suppression squad, is outside the city. And so they rush out there with Sally telling Nicole to have Bunny and Antron meet him out there. And here Nicole probably is trying to suggest, that Sally might need, but, to Rhoda that Sally might need, but then Rhoda is basically saying, I'm not in the field anymore, and besides Sonic and Amy are going to need a way home, so that's why I'm needed here. And basically what we have is the meeting between Miles and the Freedom Fighters. Tails is anxious to get his hands on his twin, if you will, because, well, I guess that's just Tails. But here Miles is kind of shows a little, to me shows a little bit of arrogance, or a little bit of suave, if you will, basically admitting to the world, suave and arrogance and cockiness, but a little bit of suave and understanding, or sensibility, I don't know what you call it. Sorry about that. And here he says, and he basically tells them he was sent here under the pretense of bombing the city, but given the fact that he made no effort to hide, and that he had explained himself slowly, because he obviously doesn't want to complete the mission. And here he basically tells Sally that the suppression squad is a lot less fonder of Scourge than you are, and that they hold a trump card in Sonic, and that maybe they can form an alliance. Now we go back to Mobius, if you will. We found. But Sonic asked, the doctor, if he could tell them about, Scourge and his latest batch of craziness. Where the doctor says that's my fault, and that's not his fault because the suppression squad stormed his tower, stole his experimental grow post, and must have used them to cross over into Mobius Prime. And basically, he explains that he needed those for medical research, other zones for medical techniques, and hoping to heal Bun's Rabot. And Sonic's wondering, well, come to think of it, I haven't seen the Anti-Bunny. And he with the suspicious squad, where is she? And then we find out from Omega, she's right there inside Omega. And basically, she just explains that she has developed NIDS, which started in the base of her spine, and that because of that, Scourge kicked her out of the group and left her for dead. And that the doctor took her in and built her this suit. And he says the least he could do, that his Omega Care Unit creates a status field that prevents her conditioning from progressing and supports her immune system. But that she is mostly trapped within the robot body and will not rest until she walks freely again. And that, in turn, she'll protect the doctor from those backstabbing so-and-sos. And that and then Sonic finally explains, explains how basically after hearing from the doctor, that explains everything that's gone on. Now, here on the next page, we have Bunny basically suggesting, they could recruit, if they need help, they could recruit who, and the doctor says, absolutely not, she's far too dangerous, and not even to joke like that. And Sonic says, Sonic's basically like, well, that's the kind of pearl I'm looking for, and Amy's basically pleading, hey, we need all the help we can get. They've taken Freedom HQ and may press onto the city in any minute. We need anything you give us. And then the doctor says, Rosie the rascal, she hates Scourge. Now we go back to New Mobotropolis. Well, basically Miles explains the whole situation, that, the leadership of the anti-freedom fighters was always in flux, and that's how it's always meant to be. And that Scourge returned with Fiona and ruined everything, beat them into submission, basically because he was bent on making them more than the evil twins, had them take on new names and appearances, and the fact that some of them, like Boomer, took that to the extreme. And that they were basically his backup as he conquered the whole world, renamed the world Mobius, made himself king, and then got bored. And that because of that, he made them steal the good doctor's technology and invade the Prime Zone. And that alone, they don't stand a chance against him because he's simply too powerful. And that's Scourge we're talking about. And so, basically what we have is them kind of agreeing to an alliance, an alliance because, as Miles puts it, we have basically already rigged your star post to send him back to Mobius. And Nicole, basically, who still has access to the lab, says yes, can confirm he's telling the truth. And that basically the alliance is agreed upon. And that right now Sonic is not there, but they can count on him when they need him. And Miles says, excellent, here's the plan. Makes you wonder, though, if he can be trusted. Now, and I will be back with part 2. Sorry about that.